even if you print something out that looks straight, and like we saw in the Hot Toys, which is, they're supposed to be printed perfectly. You see it from afar perfectly, but then when you get closer, it's little rugged lines.
Yeah, it's like
And
not it's like a rugged line. Yeah.
it's like, well, I know I can't see it because I don't have microscopic eyes,
Yeah, but
right? But it does bring up the question, why do I see a straight line then? Welcome to the Out of the Box podcast, where Steele and I, Jose, your host, get to talk about outside of the box ideas. Today, we're going to be talking about things in the world that don't seem to be right? Sometimes we're in this world and things kind of seem to be an illusion once you start looking at it at a microscopic level. Um, what seems to be on the outside is not what it is up close. Just like screens, just like straight lines, we're going to be talking about different things. But before we get started, I want to invite y'all, if this is the first time that you watch this podcast, we just want to invite you to subscribe to our channel because we're really committed to creating amazing content for you guys. And we're bringing in guests from different areas of study, and we're going to continue doing this. So if you like to join us in this journey, subscribe to our channel and to learn more. But without further ado, so Steele, I know that when I went to visit you one time, we were looking at your Hot Toys and we had a microscope and we started looking at different designs up close, like really like microscopic level. And what originally seemed like a straight line actually was not, right? I don't know if you want to expand on that.
yeah, I like how you brought that up because that's where this whole idea came from. Is That's when me and you decided, oh, that'd be cool to talk about on a podcast. Like we should do that. And we added to the. By the way, guys, we have like a long list of podcast topics, so we're just keeping it going. But this is one of them that's been on the list for a while, and it came from this idea when me and Jose were looking at like paper, salt, pepper, the Hot Toys accessories under the microscope, and yeah, you start like our vision is limited, by design. We can only see so much with the naked eye, and when we look up closer with a microscope, we start seeing things that we don't see um in our normal vision, in our normal everyday life that we pass by every day, and like, so for example, the straight line, like you look at like a ruler, I guess, for example, or like a straight piece of paper. And then the closer you get with the microscope, you start seeing all the little imperfections, and you start seeing the little crevices and nudges in the line. And then you realize it's actually not a straight line, even though it looks like one.
Yeah,
So
from far away.
yeah, it's like when you get closer, you start seeing those, I guess I call them imperfections or details.
Yeah, that's so interesting, man, because I think it's the idea also of um well, I've worked with design a little bit and done some designs myself. And usually the professionals are the ones that can go deeper into the artwork or into the pamphlet or whatever they're creating. And they can pick out details like, oh no, move this font to the left just slightly and then it'll be aligned. And they can tell you all this stuff, and now computers can help you with alignment. But it's so interesting because professionals can see that, but to a naked eye, somebody that's not trained to see things in that format, it's just so much harder to see where things should be, and but if you look at it from far away though,
Yeah.
it looks completely fine. It looks perfectly fine. But like it's only when you start looking at it closer that you start noticing the little details.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, like I know there's different personality types, and my personality type is more like general. And so for me, the details are sometimes not as important as making sometimes like the big picture. thing. And so that's just how my brain functions. Like I can see the big picture, but sometimes it's like the fine detail is just where like it's harder for me to kind of catch or to decipher.
Yeah.
But I just think about that, like how this could, apply to life as well. Like how sometimes I've overpassed situations and I haven't looked at the fine detail, right? And then maybe I thought it was something else. But I want to stick to the topic and of visual illusions, right? That we sometimes see. I know we've had similar podcasts in the past
Yeah,
where we've
Eric
kind of
Yeah, we talked with Eric Chelstrom, the philosophy professor from St. Mary's, about is reality an illusion? And I
mm,
think, it is pretty similar. And this one is almost more about is what we see what it seems, which is
yeah,
like an illusion, I guess. But it's more focused on like do straight lines even exist? And like what you said in the beginning about computers, or our smartphones that we look at every day, like they're just like pixels on a screen, and yet we treat what we see on the screen as like a part of reality, and we take
yeah,
it so seriously. We take it so seriously that a text message can make or break us mentally, and
yeah,
like, oh, we're running late to an important event that's scheduled on our pixelated calendar on our pixelated phone screen, and or we're typing an important blog for our job, our writing job.
yeah,
It's
or,
all
or
pixels
applying to it, yeah, or applying to a
to a job.
job,
Yeah,
and
none of
this is
it's
gonna determine the fate
of my
of what I do
our
as a
bank
career.
accounts. Our bank accounts are digital a lot of the
Oh
time.
yeah, you
Cryptocurrency,
know,
it's all pixels on a screen that's projected by, and that's all an illusion. It's not really a physical.
projecting information. Yeah,
The only thing that's physical is a screen, really, and I'm sure like the electronic components, of course, but when it comes down to it, what we see on the screen right now is really just an illusion of patterns of pixels and colors that come together to form the image.
yeah. Like right now, I see you,
Yeah,
and I know I'm talking to you. I hear you talking to me through my earbuds, and then I see you, so I automatically think like, oh, I'm actually hanging out with
yeah,
Steele.
that's so true. Like our brain makes those connections, even though we're not physically like hanging out or even really talking to each other necessarily. We feel like we're talking to each other. And we feel like we're having a conversation. And then the Zoom thing is so common with COVID now. It feels like we're like hanging out just like we normally would.
Yeah,
In reality, it's like so not true, because in reality, you're right now, Jose, you're a form of pixels on my computer screen, and the audio you're talking to me with your voice is like wavelengths, and it's just vibrations coming from my computer.
yeah, and I think also talking about this, yes, it does create a sense of like being here. But I think one of the things that we have taken away through with Zoom, for example, like just using this as an example, is the physical component, the actual physical component. Because I can tell you something right now, and you know, you might. I think there's something about being in person and seeing the other person that changes, right? Like I can tell you from experience of having done presentations for a job that I was doing in person and then having to switch that to do it online. And it's harder to get a feel for people. It's harder to, feel the presence of people, right? Because sometimes presenters feed off of the energy that they see or they feel from the community. And I know you can probably gauge it as well virtually through the maybe the chat, people who are commenting and that sort of thing. But at the same time, like you don't have, you can't tailor your sometimes your conversations unless you kind of know prehand who is going to be there. um it's just some thoughts, right? It's just some thoughts that I've been thinking about, like,
It's true. It's different. Yeah.
but it is, like the physical component that I see right now is creating an illusion of being present with you
Yeah,
in this conversation.
yeah, in a conversation, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true. I think you're right. Like, there's probably energy. In some cases, I don't know. I mean, maybe pheromones play a role. I guess. Like, the only thing we have right now is sight and hearing, really. And you take away other things like smell and touch, like a handshake or a perfume someone's wearing, or like they just got through jogging. Like, all those things do affect the way we interact, even though it's weird to talk about those things sometimes. It's true. I mean, those things do affect the way we interact with each other. The way
Yeah.
someone smells actually does have an impact psychologically.
Yeah. It's like, I think about like online dating nowadays, right?
Oh
Like, how you can set up a date over Zoom, and this person could be in the other side of the continent, and then you could just meet up. But like you said, you can't smell them, which is something that is important in the
yeah.
attractive,
Yeah.
right? In the attractive stage, you can't touch them, right? Which is sometimes important, right? In different cultures, some cultures don't touch, but some cultures do. So the physical touch is sometimes important, but you can see them and hear them, and so you can have other two senses. What is a fifth sense,
Oh,
right?
taste. Yeah,
Taste,
yeah.
taste.
But I don't.
So I don't think you're gonna
Yeah.
in the first date. Well, maybe through kissing, right? It's actually funny because I recently went to, and this is maybe a side note, but I recently went to a retreat, and we were talking. So in the Catholic Church, we have something called adoration, where they expose the Eucharist and you adore, right? But um, adoration, it's the word adoration comes from the word from like Latin ad ora, which means to meet at the mouth, right? And so it's to meet at the mouth in the sense of getting to know Christ through your mouth. And it's almost like that's why we kiss, because we want to get to know the other person in a relationship, and we want to get to know them through our mouth. That's why little kids put things in their mouth and chew on them. So I mean, let's say we do remove that layer. I mean, we're also removing that from from uh from getting to know somebody, right? And so it filters another level of reality, right? And so I just think about that. We're relying on our senses to make sense of our reality, right? And specifically, visual reality. I mean, I think about this too, because sometimes our senses are connected to each other, right? And I think you might know this, or I don't know if this is a psychological aspect, but I truly think that our senses are connected with each other. So we rely on sound and touch and smell sometimes simultaneously to
Mm.
make sense of our reality. And so even if it's just completely visual, and I'm, for example, reading a book, right? I'm maybe saying it out loud, or reading it out loud, or saying the words in my head, and visually seeing, and it has to be quiet around me so I can comprehend what I'm listening, what I'm reading. So sometimes we rely on other things, uh external or other senses, to really get an objective done, right? Or to really make sense of something. So I can't make sense of what I'm reading if I'm listening, if Metallica is playing right next to me, and people are fighting on the other side.
Hard to
It's going to be a distraction because my are active.
Yeah, we can't just switch, like or it takes years of meditation and training to like be able to focus during distracting elements like that.
Yeah.
Some people find it easier than others. But yeah, you're on to, I mean, yeah, like I think,
And I think about it like, what if how we looked at it at a microscope, what if looking at details in a microscope, when you look at it, it's actually being affected, like other things are affecting what we see.
Yeah,
Like maybe our hearing, our taste, our smell is changing what we see through the microscope.
I never thought about that, but now that you're saying that, I think there's been experiments done related to that, to
Like
where
let's say for example that
people have a
you
bad smell and then they perceive
yes.
it differently. I think you mentioned one podcast about coffee and stuff, how their interpretation of it changed.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, so for a lot of people who haven't heard that podcast, so they did an experiment where they 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 had somebody gets like a group of people get a cup of hot coffee and another group of people get a cold coffee, and they go to this mall, and they'll go up to someone and say like, hey, can you hold my coffee? And so some people will hold a hot coffee, and with before they even say yes or no, they'll just give the coffee to them so that they can tie their shoe. And so they'll tie their shoe, grab their coffee, say thank you, and leave. And so they had one group of hot coffee and one group of cold coffee. And so 15 minutes later, they were tracking these people moving in the mall, and they send out a group of people to go ask them if it that they were going to tell them a little slurp or a story of a character, and they had to say how they felt towards that character, right? And so they started describing a character, and they told them they would give them $20 for it. And so they're like, okay, some people said yes. And so they started describing this character, and weirdly enough, the people who held the warm coffee, right, said that the person was caring, was kind, was warm, uh, and the people who said that or held the cold coffee said they were like cold, that they were cold hearted, very distant. And it's so interesting, but it was the same description, just some people held cold coffee, some people held
Yeah,
warm coffee.
the sense of touch
And
changed.
interesting how the sense of touch changed their perspective of hearing, right? And so I wonder if they would have held the other cup, they would have said the same things that the other group said,
Yeah, it
right?
makes,
And so I think about that, does that affect other
yeah,
senses,
yeah.
right?
Does one sense affect the other sense, and then the interpretation of what you're sensing? And yeah, it definitely makes you wonder. There's also a condition called synthesia. I always have a hard time pronouncing it.
Mm,
Synthesia or something like that. Synesthesia. It's where like the five senses mix together, and you get really strange results. Like people say they can taste colors and like I don't know, hear, touch,
taste the
or I don't know.
rainbow.
Yeah. Well, they can taste colors. I mean, not taste colors, but taste shapes. Like they can see a triangle and taste it just by seeing it.
Wow.
The wires or something with the five senses in their brains gets crossed and overlapped, and
Yeah.
so when that happens, the senses start overlapping, and then before you know it, you can see colors and taste shapes, or will see sound, I should say. And they say when they see sounds like certain musical notes, it's consistent apparently across people, I think. And so like they'll hear a certain note on a piano and they'll see the color blue or see the color yellow on a different note on the piano. And so like the wires cross, and so it just shows us how
Interconnected.
our physical brain is designed a certain way and works a certain way with all the physical components. And when those physical components change and the wires get crossed, the neurons or whatever is controlling that aspect of perception, and like the sense of touch gets overlapped with the sense of sight or something, then you start getting strange new experiences that no one else experiences. Like it literally changes reality for us. Like to be able to like taste a shape or hear or like see a sound. That's so weird to me and you.
Yeah.
We haven't experienced it, but to those people, it's very real, and it's their reality. So our reality is actually different based on our perception from theirs, and so it just shows how much our reality can change.
Yeah.
Like, well, do we even know what we're perceiving right now is real? Like, I mean, do we even know like it's accurate? I guess I should say, because like we
Mm.
said, when you look under a microscope, like this piece of paper right now, like I see words on it, and they look like they're perfectly straight lines. But when we look under the microscope, it's like the words, you can see the ink like on the paper, and the paper is like rough looking, and it's all stringy, and the ink is like splotty. It's not perfect, but right now it looks
Yeah.
like it is. So
Yeah,
it's
and even if you print something out that looks straight, and like we saw in the Hot Toys, which is, they're supposed to be printed perfectly. You see it from afar perfectly, but then when you get closer, it's little rugged lines,
yeah, it's like
and
not just
it's
like a rugged line. Yeah,
and it's like, well, I know I can't see it because I don't have microscopic eyes,
yeah, but
right? But it does bring up the question, why do I see a straight line then?
yeah, it's like the
Is
distance.
my mind making this straight line,
Yeah,
or
is your mind simplifying reality itself to understand it better? Because we talked
whoa,
about in a podcast, we talked
oh,
about the blind spot in our vision, how there's a hole in the middle of our vision at all times, but our brain fills in the gap. So I wonder if like the straight line, it's like our brain's filling in the gap, because
yeah,
otherwise it would be too complicated, you know. But then we also know
yeah,
our vision is limited.
ooh, maybe because, yeah, like you said, maybe our brain can't compute like all the details, and so it just generalizes and like sees the overall picture
I can't.
of reality.
It's like too overwhelming otherwise.
It would be too overwhelming. Yeah.
Another thing that was really cool that we looked under the microscope was that Harvey Dent pen with the American flag on it. And I remember when we looked at it, you can see the red, white, and blue, but then when you get closer, so it was like colors of green and yellow and like different. It was like dots of like green, yellow, and stuff like that. And we can't even see those colors on the pin, but in a microscope, you see like dots of different colors. And then when you look at it from afar, it makes an image. But when you're close up, you can't even see the image anymore. So it's like, what does that mean? Yeah, that's pretty weird. Oh, your
You
audio's
go
gone.
deeper to kind of clean out, you're cropping out a picture or something, and you're taking it out of the background, and you go deeper into the picture, and then it's all pixelated, and you can
Yeah,
see the little squares, right, of the picture, and you're trying to erase one square at a time just to kind of clean out a rough edge. But then once you look at it from afar, it's like, oh, you didn't even see
yeah, it looks.
that there was a background.
Yeah, when
It's
you
just
look,
like clean
yeah,
cut.
and it's weird. It's like I think our brains do create that illusion because when you zoom in on something else, like a TV screen, like a plasma screen TV, you start seeing little like red, green, and blue. I think it's red, green, and blue dots, and they just look like dots. You can't even tell.
Or try this too. You put a little bit of water, like a drop of water on your phone screen, and you'll start seeing like almost like a rainbow,
Oh, really?
like
Oh,
on
yeah,
that part. Yeah, yeah. So
fraction.
sometimes, like if a drop of water falls into a screen, you can start seeing the pixelation of
I didn't know that.
of yeah. So it's kind of crazy.
So
You kind of have to mess around with it, but it basically, whenever I was learning about computers, they say that it's just a lot of straight lines just constantly going, and that's how computer screens kind of work. It just has like straight lines, or what we call straight lines. It's just, pixelations moving to kind of match reality or mirror reality. Maybe it's just a mirror of reality.
it's
It's
weird.
trying to mirror something that's in the real world.
Actually, I think so because the primary colors of vision is red, green, and blue. Like they're like that's actually how if I remember correctly, like let's see, the three primary colors. Yeah, the three primary colors that our eyes see biologically is red, blue, and green, according to Google. Um, but our rods and cones in our eyes, which perceive all those different colors, mix those red, blue, and green colors together to create all the other shades of colors that we see right now. And it's like it's weird, you know, it's like the mixture of those colors creates new colors. And just like
Yeah,
the TV screen uses the primary colors, I think of red, blue, and green, if I remember.
yeah,
And then we get farther away, and then we see the image of red, blue, and green mixed together to create the image on the TV. It's like they modeled that after our vision. Our vision works the same way. It mixes those three primary colors together. And it's
yeah,
when like it's like somehow mixes it together in our brain to form more complicated images. It's pretty weird.
yeah. It's kind of crazy.
And so yeah, I mean, it just makes you think, like, yeah,
Just like, because I taken uh like art classes, and we talk about colors and color theory and
color
all
weird.
that stuff, where yeah, the color wheel, where there's like the primary colors and then secondary and tertiary, and I'm sure you could continue going on where you get the pastel colors and all that. But I was always fascinated ever since I was little of mixing colors and making new colors, right? Because sometimes I didn't have that many resources. So if I wanted to get, green and I only had yellow and blue, then, you combine it and you make a new color. Um, and they actually say that if you have red, blue, and yellow, you can actually make any color in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
So I think maybe white might be another one that you need. But if you have those three main ones, you can make a lot of different colors. And so it's interesting because you start thinking about it like, oh wow, like is it really possible to create more colors? And yeah, I mean, I just think it's fascinating how our our eyes, but even in colors, like I don't know if you looked at clothing, but when you look at clothing and you look at it at a microscopic level, I don't know if you've seen the new shirts where it's like, little stripes of white, little stripes of red, little stripes of, you know maybe like another color, and then from afar, it looks blended. It looks
Oh, really?
maybe like that's what our brain is trying to just make sense of it. So it just compiles all those different colors into
Mine's
one,
together like a computer.
right? Like let's say it's like a shirt looks purple, right? It looks purple, but then once you look at it closer, it's little like strands of blue and red.
Yeah, and you
So
don't
in a
realize.
sense, like and this is something I've noticed, like in a sense from far away, it does look purple. But then once you look at it closely, it's not. It's just red and blue. And I've thought I've I think that's so interesting.
It is really weird, and I remember from my biological psychology class that our brain is really complicated. It actually has like separate portions of the brain that like determine that perceive an object diagonally, horizontally, vertically, and there's actually different parts of the brain that perceive just that, and then it mixes them together to create a full shape. So, like part of my brain perceives the computer screen like horizontally and vertically, but separately. But then the brain combines those two perceptions together to make me see the whole screen together.
Mm,
And same with our faces. Like there's actually specific areas in our brain that perceive the organization of a face and recognition of a person's face. And
mm.
those all combine together to create the final thing we see right now. So we don't
But
realize there's different components working together.
yeah, and I'm wondering too, like let's say I drink something cold today in the morning, will I see the same, square line? Like, or I don't know, maybe like I'm trying to think like maybe in terms of colors. Like if I'm holding, like in the other example, I'm holding a a uh a cup that's warm, right? Will I see colors in a warm sense? Like will
Oh,
I
yeah,
like see it differently? Like you might see them like, oh, it's like, it's like an intense red. But then I'm like, no, it's like a really like intense
right.
orange,
Good idea.
right?
Or
Or
if it's cold, yeah, if it's like like it's like a water that's dyed red, and you have it like boiling hot, and you're holding it, and you're like, oh, this is like a very vibrant red,
Yeah.
freezing cold. Like that was kind of a calm, cool red. I didn't think about that. That's kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah. It changes your perspective of how you see something.
Yeah, and same with the microscope. When you mentioned that earlier, it made me start thinking how we talked with the physics professor, Dr. Lombardini from St. Mary's, about
Mm,
quantum mechanics.
mechanics.
How like the theory that just observing the quantum particles can change the way they are in existence. So like,
Whoa.
does that work with a microscope too? Like, like because we have these measuring devices in science, but are how accurate are they to measure reality for what reality really is? Well, a microscope has different lenses. It has dust on the lenses if it's old. It has grime and dirt on the lenses, and the crystal, that the certain shape of the crystal in the microscope to magnify the object, and the way it's built and designed. Do all of those individual tiny little components affect the way the microscope shows us a version of reality?
Mm.
You
And
know?
I think that's why maybe sometimes when people do experiments, they have to do several tries so that they don't just get a subjective idea. They get an objective idea based on several tries and maybe different people looking through the microscope and saying, yes, I see the same thing as you have described.
That's true. I just think that like we're doing the best with what we have. So we do have to
Yeah.
use experimental method, like you said, to get as close to reality as we possibly can. And it is
Yeah. But it
effective,
does make sense, like what you're saying about like
not perfect.
how if what you see can tell like in the quantum mechanics of things can change or alter things in reality, then what we see in a microscope one day, would it be different 2 years from now?
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like I think about that, like, oh, like before you saw it blue and green and now you see it purple and green, right? It changes, or I don't know.
Or even like the most subtle change maybe too. And I think what getting real specific with the microscope, I think if like you have a certain lens, and let's say you just bought the microscope and it's brand new, and it's pristine, perfectly clean and sterile. You look through it for the first time at one of the like a newspaper cutout, and you see it a certain way, and let's say you record that, and then let's say a year passes and now the microscope lens is all kind of dusty and dirty, it has oil smudge on it. And then you look through it at the exact same newspaper print, but it looks slightly different because the lens now has dust and dirt on it. So what you're
Yeah,
seeing is different than what you first saw. So I'm saying I think specific components of a microscope, the shape of the lens, everything to the tiniest little detail that's different might affect the way we perceive what's in the microscope.
yeah.
So
And I think about also the how you said in near death experiences, people have experienced like colors that they would never be
yeah,
have been able to perceive in real life, like things just feel, taste, smell like in an amplified way. And I wonder like if we could experience that in our human bodies right now, but just that we have so many limitations or mental blocks of what society or reality should look like, that it fills in those gaps for everyone, right? Because we're all learning the same kind of things in a way. Maybe it slightly varies, but you know, maybe that's what we could experience. However, we we have our mind is trying to fill in those things in the same way, so we never get to experience those colors or sensations in a new way. Because I was thinking about it too when you were saying when you first got contacts, you said colors just like trees look so much brighter
I
and
think
like things just look so much like vibrant. And I was thinking about that. I was like, whoa, that's interesting that how can glasses, which are supposed to kind of fix vision, um, how are they different from contacts, right? Like, how are they different from contacts? And then, why do we lose vision in the first place? Like our ancestors, like they didn't need glasses, right? They had perfect teeth, like, and now we need braces to fix them and all this stuff. And so it's things that I think about, like, are we are our brains evolutionary made to look at detail, like to actually look at detail, or are we forcing our vision too much and causing it to or is it a mental barrier? Because I was reading a book on how to fix your vision, and it said that more than exercising the muscles of your eyes and all that, it's actually mental and emotional barriers that cause you not to see. And so it's basically almost like an interior, like, healing aspect, because it's saying, like, the reason why a lot of people think that you can't change your vision is because, you know they have like emotional blockages of, like, rejection, like, something like trauma or something like that, where this is interesting because, and this is what the book was saying, because it's so hard to look at that reality, right? Like, the reality of, like, trauma or something that happened, our eyes automatically start suppressing that, and which causes us to lose vision. And so putting on glasses is actually just illuminating that again, right? And seeing that reality that we don't want to see, right?
Yeah, that's
And so our eyes start almost suppressing that and, like, erasing not seeing, right? And so it's, like, so crazy, like, we can tell our brain to see or not to see, uh or lose vision, you know and yeah, I thought it was so interesting. I haven't fully fixed my vision because I haven't finished reading the book and put everything into practice, but from what I read, it did seem to be more of an emotional aspect rather than, you know like a physical, like, deterioration. Like, I'm sure, like, there is, like, oh well, things happen in a war, and you got smoke in your eyes, but there's been stories of people being able to fix back their eyesight almost to 2020, and that's really crazy. And a lot of people say, like, oh, that's not real, like, you can't fix your eyesight, but, like, that's because they already have that limitation on themselves, and they're like, well, why aren't people doing it? And I'm like, well, it's the same reason why people are not getting fit, because it's hard to do. It takes time, it takes effort, and so not everyone's willing to do that, so they just rather put on glasses and fix the problem.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, we definitely we try to stay away from hard work. A lot of people are cognitive misers, try to do the least amount of work that we can get away with. You know, that's pretty common. But yeah,
yeah.
that mental block can stop a lot of things. It
Or
reminds
even stress. I've noticed that whenever I get stressed, my eyesight, like, weakens.
Mhm.
Like, I've noticed that in the mornings when I wake up and I'm fully rested, my eyesight is really, like, really good. And then so our eyesight is not just like a one dimensional thing as we like to think, right? Like, just like time. I guess we're beings who think very like, very straightforward, one dimensionally.
Yeah.
But I think our vision might be able to tap into, like, outside of our dimension, but we see it just one dimensionally, and it actually is fluctuating throughout the day. It's not like, oh, we see 2020 right now, and then we see 2018 right now, and then 2 hours later, I mean, or, like, we see 2020 all day. It's, like, fluctuating all the time. And so
Yeah, I mean, like especially when we focus on something, like if I zone out and my eyes are out of focus on something, it might not be that same. Because when you're at the eye doctor, you have to focus on what they tell you to focus on because they're trying to measure, get some type of objective measure of your vision for glasses. And so you have to actually focus and pay attention with your eyes, you know? Whereas throughout the day, we might be fluctuating in our attention and focus all the time. Like, I'm not focusing on my I'm not focusing on what's behind my desk. I'm focusing on the computer monitor, and so behind it is blurry, you know. So
Yeah.
so it's kind of interesting, and I don't know if you know, but there's mental disorders that actually take away vision with no medical explanation. So I think in some cases, emotions and mental status can affect vision because in conversion disorder, something that's been around for a long time in mental health. I don't know how common it is now, but there's been studies and like it's in the diagnostic manual, like the DSM-5 conversion disorder, where somatic symptoms like the loss of vision or paralysis of someone's arm happens because of mental problems, and there's no medical explanation of it, and that's how you diagnose it. If you can't find a medical reason, then it's conversion disorder. It's actually a mental block, and so they
Oh,
literally go blind and there's no medical reason for it, but mentally there is like a mental block. And so we know that can happen, you know, like paralysis or loss of vision. And it's interesting. The patient will say, like, I can't move my arm, I can't move my arm. When they can, it's just they have a mental block. And
whoa.
so so that's what that reminds me of when you were talking about that. It's a very real thing that can
We
happen.
can choose to blind ourselves.
Yeah. And the patient is not even aware of it, you know. So it might happen unconsciously.
Wow.
Maybe there's
That is kind of interesting that we can have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, it's weird. And you think about it, it's our brain. It's our brain. Like we control more of our brain than maybe we realize, even unconsciously. So someone unconsciously is struggling with a mental problem or mental block, and so they mentally, with conversion disorder, lose their vision. You know, and so yeah, it's weird. It's like if we had more control, maybe and belief, could we overcome that? And I'm just talking about conversion disorder, but
Yeah.
it's pretty.
And I think about this too because sometimes like right now I'm thinking about it, I'm processing, I'm maybe like in my beta wave state of like processing information. My brain is functioning at that brain wave. What if I just thought about another thing. Like what if, what we see also depends on what level of brainwave we are in, right? Like let's say, in the morning we're waking up and we're in the alpha stage, still kind of like waking up. It's when we're like most creative and also like late at night when we're about to fall asleep, we start getting into alpha state. And then when we're asleep, we're like in delta and you know um theta theta wave states. And so and so I think about like, you know because we see things in our dream, and that's when we're in a delta state. And so how is it different from from uh from alpha and beta? Because sometimes, I mean, I've had moments, where I'm like working out, and then all of a sudden I have that moment where I just like wake up from my like running of thoughts, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually here present.
Oh, you zone out, yeah, or like daydreaming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like working out and like you're doing your thing, but then you're like thinking about things. And it's like, I know like nowadays they practice a lot of mindfulness, but like what if mindfulness is actually our natural state of being, like, and the state that we're in is actually just an unnatural state where we're trying to make more or like be more productive, and it's actually not natural because it's putting us in a state that's outside of our normal human sense,
You
right?
don't
Like
Yeah. I mean, what
we call mindfulness like, oh, we have to do mindfulness practices, what if mindfulness was actually, before just the natural state of being, and we've like now come to like separate ourselves from that.
See, and I would ask the philosophical question to that: what is a natural state? How do we define what that is?
Mm,
How do we know?
yeah, like when you're fully present and in the moment, just like experiencing life one step at a time without thinking of what's going to happen next or what happened before. Because I see animals, I see like deer, like whenever they're going to be attacked, they start running, and then once they see everything's fine, then they just like look calm and start eating grass again.
Yeah, you're
And so
saying.
they forget about what happened. They're not thinking about what's going to happen next. They're just like they're eating grass.
Yeah, you're saying like a natural state. If we're looking at animals, but like as an example, is like the present moment because they're basing their behaviors and emotions off of instincts and based on the present state of the environment. It's like
Yeah.
human beings, we have a tendency to look towards the past or look towards the future with
Yeah.
daydreaming, and we that can influence the way we perceive reality. So we're not in the present moment and we're not doing mindfulness. But animals are naturally occurring beings, I guess, in the universe, and they are in the present moment, like you said, because as soon as like the car is gone, they go back to what they're doing. They're not thinking about the past that the car just went by and could have killed them. They're already over it, and they're focusing now on the present moment of there's food and let me eat now, and they're not thinking about the future. What if I could have died, like humans would? And so I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
At the same
And I think, and maybe the natural state of human beings is a little bit of both, right? Because we have consciousness, which means that we're able to think, which has allowed us to create everything that's around here.
makes us different than animals.
It makes us different than animals. So perhaps we do need that like animal, like present state of being, but we also have the capacity to think long term or think about the past and remember memories. I'm sure animals can remember
We
memories
don't
and
know that. That's the thing. We don't even know. Like how can I know if a deer feels anxiety? I mean, and we can know that animals feel fear based on how they respond to things in the environment. Like a porcupine is walking around and it steps on a thorn and then it jolts back in pain, and we think, oh, it must feel pain. That means it must have maybe a fear. I don't know. But then we're just assuming, like, do we even know that's true? We're just basing it off of what we see.
what we our reality,
Projecting.
yeah,
We're
imposing it
projecting
on others.
our Yeah, it's like we're projecting what we experience onto something else, and we don't even know if that's what they experience.
Yeah.
Like like an animal doesn't go off a cliff and jumps off because it somehow knows that if it does, it will die. So the animal's predicting the future. Like if I walk off this cliff, I'm gonna fall and die. But how does the animal know that? Is it an instinct?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
Because I think about this too, because sometimes the cat I have my neighbors have a cat, and whenever I think it gets stressed, like it starts clawing
oh yeah.
on this mat, and so it's like stretching and clawing at the same time, almost as if releasing stress. And
Why do you think that? Is it because that's how humans release stress? Like, you
well,
know?
I mean I think sometimes like you know a release of stress is sometimes maybe due to like sometimes like lifting weights, you have to lift something and push
That energy.
to push out something else, almost like to release energy.
So
And so I feel like without the cat realizing that they're doing that, I think that's what it seems like it's trying to release energy by scratching on that mat so that it could relieve stress.
So, like as Dr. Penio Cardenas, who was on our podcast, would say, like, will you use the use of your reason to figure out reality? Like
Yeah.
like we don't know that for a fact because we don't know what the cat is experiencing, but you used your reason to discover some truth about reality. You're
Mm,
putting things together to figure it out, and even
yeah.
though, like me and you, we can't know for a fact exactly what the cat is experiencing, but you can put things together like the tension of and the action of what they're doing is like tense, so you're like, and then humans experience stress, so they act similarly. So you've kind of put two and two together.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's still in some sense an assumption about
An
reality,
assumption. Yeah.
but it is as close as we can get to
To
figuring it out.
what they're trying to say. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that's a mystery. Like,
That's awesome, man.
hard question. Yeah.
Any last thoughts?
Um, no, I mean, I think just to the audience to question the reality and know that what you're seeing right now probably isn't actually what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I would say, there's different visual things that can change your mind and perspective of life. Like I went to Dallas about a month ago or two now, and it was interesting because I went to an illusion museum
Oh, that sounds
with my brother, and so there was illusions all over the place. And it's sometimes interesting to think like how standing from one place to another and like moving the room a little bit can make you seem smaller than the other person,
so weird.
or just visual tactics like that you know at blind, just naked eye, like it seems odd or it seems weird, but it's actually playing tricks on our mind, because as you said, our mind is trying to make up sense of reality, and so
It's weird.
it's testing that. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening to our podcast today. We really appreciate you staying tuned to all these illusions that sometimes we see in life. So if you thought this was interesting, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and also subscribe to our channel, because we are committed to continue providing amazing content for you guys that is out of the box, and it's interesting topics in the world. So let us know what you thought about the video, and until next time, we'll talk to you soon.